Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm David.
And this is the Practical Guitarist Podcast.
The podcast for people who eat, sleep, and breathe guitar. The Practical Guitarist Podcast is brought to you by Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. Great Lakes Guitar Pickups provides fantasy tones at prices a practical guitarist will love. Featuring top-notch construction, attention to detail, and a fully custom product, if you can dream it, Great Lakes Guitar Pickups can probably build it. Follow them on Facebook at facebook.com/Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. Are you a regular listener? Why not? David here reminding you of all the ways you can participate in the Practical Guitarist Podcast. Subscribe using your chosen podcast app. Review us on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or Google Play. Find our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Practical Guitarist or on Twitter as @PractGuitarist. Support the show. Merchandise is available in our Threadless store at practicalguitaristpodcast.threadless.com. And donate to us via Patreon, available at patreon.com/practicalguitarist. Reach out to us directly via email at questions@practicalguitarist.com.
His Logitech monitors. They're shit. They are the cheap $120 pair of Logitech monitors, with the subwoofer thing. Yeah.
Jim's nose is whistling.
It's that bad. I can't get any air through it.
All right, we've already started, so I'm just going to fade us into this episode or something. I'll figure it out. Yeah, man. Gearfest happened. You weren't there. It sucks. You were missed, and It was pretty clear everybody was asking and talking about you. They were like, "I'm glad that they were really sad that you weren't there," and
they were glad I didn't buy the stuff they did. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I couldn't have afforded the stuff that you guys bought.
You saw the live streams, right? So everybody walked away with something they weren't anticipating buying.
Yeah,
but
great.
Almost everybody got a super deal on something. I got a text message from Dan Kish last night. He bought a $20 gravity pick for 99 cents.
Oh my God.
He might have walked out with the steal of the show, because that's 1,000%.
I mean, yeah. How many percent is that? I got to do the math on that. I'm going to stick that in the calculator. I mean, that's 2,000%, I think.
Yeah, because I think they were just they probably have so many gravity picks that they just, if you want a Gearfest, we'll give you one for 99 cents. It's no big deal. We don't care. But I got, even my Kemper was I think it was $200 and something off. And I know that Music Man was the deal steal for Nick. He got that Music Man for I don't know, it was $2,200 new. He got it for at least $1,000 off.
Well, you got that for 0.5% of the total cost.
But it was fun, man. I hope you do get the opportunity to come next year. We're going to plan to do something in the fall. Hopefully things shake out well. I've been invited to go up to Tom's place and Nick's place when you come up here, so maybe we can figure out which one we want to go to.
Wow.
Tom has a studio. Nick has available rooms and vintage gear galore.
Well, that's if I came from New York, that's kind of on the way. We could
Yeah, I mean, we could maybe do the pass. That I had a really good time talking to Dr. Z too, and I'd like to
shoot over there.
I'd drop by and just hang out with him for a little bit and maybe do a podcast or something with him if I can get a hold of him.
Yeah, is he in Ohio or is he in?
Yeah, they're in Ohio. They're right, but they're not that far from Sweetwater. They're an hour's drive from Sweetwater.
Yeah, I know. I'm pretty sure I went by there when I would go to Fort Wayne when I was driving in and out of there.
Yeah, dude, those amps are legit. I know some of the people we were with didn't think they were the bee's knees or anything, but I as a player, the way the touch sensitivity and stuff, they were a perfect fit for the way that I play. And I almost I'd have given Dan Kish $50 to buy me some of those things. Yeah, right.
Just buy everyone they had.
I would have bought some of them for you.
Yeah.
I would have bought, dude. I was thinking about buying a couple things and just sending them your way, but
if I was I was almost literally offline. I haven't been. My computer hasn't been powered up since Thursday. 5 days,
Yeah.
4 or 5 days. Um, I I haven't been at work. I haven't been anything. But anyway, what was I going to say? I had something to say. I had something to say.
Well, just with regards to everybody that was there and everything, like, and the whole plan. So I made it real clear on the show that I was going to go in and I was going to buy something expensive, and then I didn't say what it was. Like, I obviously bought a Kemper. For
Yep.
those of you who aren't included into the Facebook, like our Facebook page and group, I did buy a Kemper. That was what I
Yep.
was going in to buy. But that whole drama of how that actually happened was really entertaining for everybody to watch, except for me, because I was having a panic attack the whole time. So I walked in, and we walked out to the tents, and the first thing that I saw was like the Mace Boogie booth. And I'm like, I'm going over there. And Kish was talking to the rep, and I was talking to the rep, and then I saw this blue Triple Crown, right? It was a blue snakeskin leather covered Triple Crown, and it had orange. I think it was flame, but it might have been curly maple, like on the front.
Yep.
And I know what those upgrades cost, and I'm like, that's like a $3,000, Triple Crown, and it was marked to 2,300. And I was like, I'm gonna play it. I've never played the combo. Like, it's a 1x12. Let's see what happens. I played it, and the guy was dialing it in as I was playing it, and we were talking and going back and forth, and there was like a crowd of people like starting to watch, and like, I was like, I'm gonna buy it. I just put it in the cart, and I was like, I was kind of having a panic attack because I'm like, can I live with this for the next 3 years? Because that's what this has to be, And I was walking around.
Right.
So I ended up in another tent, and I saw Dr. Z's. And I didn't even realize Dr. Z was sitting there. He was behind a table. He had some umbrellas near him, which I don't know what that was all about. But he was sitting at a table, and the rep plugged me into the new amp, the Nova, which is like a JTM 45.
Yep.
And I freaking lost it. Like, that thing sounded so good.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the amp. So like the amp on its own, like I could have gotten down with. I would have needed pedals, But then they brought out the Dr. Z Drive. And the little drive pedal they make is legit. Like, it's one of the best drive pedals for like pushing an amp and making it, distort in the right way and giving it enough dirt to like juice it. And it's got some really nice features. I think one side of it's germanium, and I think the other one's standard. I honestly thought about buying one when I was playing it, but I'm like, I really am not going to need drive pedals because I have dirt out my butt. I mean, I had 3 dirt pedals with me at the Airbnb. So Nick sees all this going on, right? And he pulls me aside, and actually pulled me aside right after the Mason Boogie. And he's like, dude, that's not what you want. He's like, you want the Kemper. Like, don't be like that. And we went back and forth for a minute. And I said, like, I've been playing Triple Crowns for a while. And like, this is something I've been thinking about. And I had them put the Dr. Z in the cart. And I was like, I'll have to make a decision when I check out. And because they pull it aside if you put it in the cart. So then we decided we were going to play Kemper, and there was no Kemper booth. So we went back into the store and waited for the quiet room, and we got in the quiet room and plugged the Kemper in. There's a little bit of like fussing with the Kemper because for whatever reason that one of the firmwares they shipped out had some issues. Same thing I had the one at the Guitar Center, but now I knew how to fix it. So I just reset it. And then we just started calling up patches, and we were handing the guitar back and forth between Nick and I. And both he and I couldn't tell a difference between that and the real amps. And we were like, done.
Was it really? So it was really that good? It was that close?
Dude, there's a deluxe model in there. Like, as soon as I turned it on, we just looked at each other, and I was like, done, put it in the cart. I'm like, I'll take the other 2 out. I was like, it's so good that it's just sick. And I mean, basically what did it for Nick, I think, was when you turned the volume knob down and it rolled back like super smooth, just like a real amp. And we looked at each other, and it's just like, done. Honestly, when you have that first moment with the Kemper where you find it doing something that a real amp does that no other modeler does, you kind of sit there and you have this moment where you're like, well, tube amplification is over because there's no need for it anymore. But I know, I mean, obviously this model's real world things and that kind of thing, and that we're not quite there yet, but it definitely for a gigging musician even as a studio tool, like I know a lot of people downplay the fact that this is being used in a lot of studios. I think the Kemper is one of the best tools you can possibly buy. And honestly, I kick myself for not having bought one like 3 years ago. Because when I bought my Helix, I could have saved a bit more money and bought a Kemper easily.
Yeah.
And the coolest thing is, though, it's got the power amp. So put it on the cabinet. Sounds like a real amp. Plug it into your system. You got cabinet modeling. It sounds great. And you know, and it excels at both. And I was literally, I had a home last night. I think I played like 2 hours on it. And I was downloading patches of Triple Crowns and loading them into it. And
I think that the thing that sells people on the Line 6 Helix versus the Kemper in the long run is that there's a couple things that the Line 6 Helix does well.
it integrates in an existing rig really well.
Yep.
I mean, that's really the reason why I think people still look at things like that in the Axe effects, and they're like, this can be way more flexible to me, and it's a safer thing to get into than saying, you know what, I'm just going to digitize everything and be done with it.
Well, you don't have to lose your pedals, and you still have control of your MIDI control of your pedals. You have loops. The Line 6 Helix has what, 3 loops or 4 loops?
Yeah. I mean, you only get 1 loop on the Kemper.
Yep, you only get 1 loop on the Kemper, like your regular amp, I say. And I think that the Helix, because Line 6 is good at one thing, and that's really shoving a lot of effects into it.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in the Helix, but
yeah,
I think and I was talking to Kish about this on the way back. We had a lot of time talking in the car because it was like a 3-hour ride both ways. I told him, I said, I think the reason why I like the Kemper more than the Helix is the Kemper is imperfect, right? If you record your profiles in an ugly room with an ugly microphone, your profile is going to sound ugly. And I think that for me is like kind of where I am. I'm at the point where I can tell when something is squeaky clean, perfect, and not realistic. And that really bothers me. And that's the vintage side of me coming out, like the vintage lover in me that would never buy a vintage amp because I'm terrified about reliability. But I think this has more of that appeal and charm to it than, say, real amp. But that's the Kemper. Like, we can talk about that. That could be a whole episode, and I want to get more time under my belt before I really start talking about it, because I know I'm honeymooning still, and that's a big thing. I'd like to be able to get a couple of show dates things under my belt and do some recordings, and then talk about the Kemper and how I'm using it and how it works out for me long term. Because right now I'm just shocked by the fact that I was able to download Triple Crown patches in an hour and get this thing sounding like a Triple Crown, and then go turn around and get Mark V patches and literally make it almost indistinguishable to my Mark V 25. For the average listener, obviously I can tell the difference because it's the big boy versus the EL84 version. I do intend to actually profile my Mark V, because none of the Mark Vs I played have the settings that I would use. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But anyway, what I do want to talk about for a minute is Gearfest in general. So if all goes well, and this may not actually happen, but I'm going to try to post the audio for the show on the video where we talk about Gearfest. Or where I do all the documentary Gonzo Gearfest footage. And basically what I try to do in the footage, and you can probably tell, Jim, is just like follow the journey through going to Gearfest. So like walking around through all the tents. That's why it's a half-hour video. There's a lot of stuff there. And I didn't even cover it all in the video, to be honest with you. There's probably 8 or 9 booths I missed in the guitar section. And I didn't even go through all of the flea market tent because it was busy all weekend. We didn't do a whole lot of the education again this year. I think I sat through 2 sessions. I sat through the Randall Smith one, which was great. I sat through part of it would be 3. Sat through part of the Steve Vai one, but when it became such like a salesman thing, I left. And then we sat through a mixing session with the Universal Audio guys, and that was actually enlightening. I learned a lot in there. And I think, because I sat in there with Dan, and he hasn't, I don't think he has a lot of experience with a super advanced, like, pop style mixing where they, are side chaining everything and all this stuff. And he was just like, he was like deer in the headlights. I didn't even know it could be this complicated. And I'm like, it's not always easy to get the sounds that you hear on these pop records. but also, it's kind of strange to find out that like some of those sounds that sound like beeps and blips are really actual drums that have been just processed to all hell, and stuff like that. But
it's funny you mentioned that. When I was at Guitar Center, Well, I don't know where I was today. To be honest with you, everything I'm doing has kind of been a blur the last few days. But I heard a guitar sound today that sounded like bleeps and bloops, and I was like, "But that's a guitar. That's so ridiculously over the top."
yeah,
And I mean, it's cool in the context that it had. It just, to me, it was like,
that's why I
it was,
want one of those Boss SY 3000s or whatever, the synth pedal. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I was looking at, I want a Digitech Jam Band. You know that, right?
Yeah, and they were selling them at Sweetwater. They were marked down too.
Were they written? See, my dog was moaning so loud it was going to come through here.
Yeah,
See, I wanted to be there. There was that. There was the microphone. I would have told my rep. I would have said, "Hey, give David my thing. You can put it on my Sweetwater card. Get this, get this stuff for me."
yeah. They So I ended up the one cool deal I found microphone wise. So they always do the 5758s. They had MD 421s for $250. They're usually $400. I was like, yes. I looked at that. I was like, well, I guess I'm not getting a 57 this year.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because I'm like, that's a mic that's been in my like wish list for a really long time.
Yeah.
And the joke, of course, is that since I bought 3 years worth of guitar gear here, I figure next year, if I do go, like the only thing I'm even going to be looking at is microphones.
So you're going to have the years of no gears.
Yeah. So so we're not doing like a stunt with this because obviously there will probably be things that I'll end up buying, but I'm going to try to be frugal. I have a support group of people that know why I'm trying to be frugal now, who are going to like, slap me around a little bit. And one of those is like the elite frugal people in our group, and that's Dan Kish. So I think I can be cheapened by these people, and I think they can talk some sense into me. But I also think that the gear I have right now is going to last me 3 years without really me even worrying about it. Because I mean, the Kemper, if you get bored with it, you just download profiles.
Now you had discussed possibly getting another 7-string.
Yeah, I'm still doing that, but I haven't sold the guitars yet.
Yeah, you want to do that part.
Yeah, I got to clean house first.
But you did get rid of the garbage guitar.
Yeah, the Ibanez finally went out the door. It went out the door 2 days before Gearfest. I was actually having a mild panic attack about having to ship the damn thing. So I think it's sold. I haven't heard anything from the person on the other end, so I'm assuming that all went well. And that they were satisfied with the condition. I tried to document as much as I could about how messed up the guitar was. And sometimes luthiers will buy guitars like that because they want to practice something. And hopefully that's where it went.
Well, it's relatively inexpensive. What'd you charge? Like 180?
It was I got $250 out of it.
250? Yeah.
Yeah, with shipping.
Yeah, that's relatively inexpensive.
Mm-hmm,
given that if you're going to do something like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't want to like spend the whole episode talking about Gearfest, but I want to segue. So one thing that was really cool is that they brought the Gibson Roadshow kind of to Sweetwater this year. They didn't have much of a booth last year. I mean, in fact, I think it was manned by Sweetwater reps, which was kind of strange. And they just had it was like 8 or 9 guitars or 10 or 12 guitars or something. And it was just like they were sitting on stands and whatever. But they had the truck and they had their tent, and their tent was actually kind of small, but in the front they had the luthiers that work for Gibson doing the inlay carving and all that stuff and pickup winding. And we took some time, and Nick was talking to the winder, and I went around and of course looked at all the guitars and stuff. We did get a chance to see some of the double cuts in the showroom, and I played a couple of Les Pauls that were 2019s. Their quality is definitely improving. Like I was really thrilled to actually get to lay hands on some honest to God, well set up 2019s to get an idea of what they feel like. I didn't think that they were all that bad before. But they're definitely like a cut above what they had been at, when I play them at Guitar Center and things like that. I will say that, the word on everybody's lips while they were there was like the whole scam showdown thing with Mark Agnesi and the video, and that's why I want to segue, because it really is the perfect segue. I mean, honestly, you can tell the guys that are in the Gibson tent don't give a crap that Gibson is, suing Dean and probably going to be suing other companies very shortly. I have my thoughts on this video, and I guess
before we go down that road, I want to say something that I've discovered about that lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
So, not the Mark Agnesi video aside, which I want to talk about afterwards.
That's a whole other can of worms,
different thing. But the lawsuit thing. Here's an interesting thing I found out. The lawsuit was actually filed back in the Henry Jeskowitz days. So it's actually been in the works for about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So that thing coming to light, the reasoning for bringing it to light now, is
big flashing sign for small builders. Stop it.
It's like the small builders going, oh, you're picking on me, but you did it 2 years ago. I mean, they did it 2 years ago. They filed that 2 years ago, and they were told. The whole, as you know, in the legal system, things don't happen overnight.
No.
So that's the reason that it's been so long.
But
in the works.
To current Gibson's credit, they could drop the suit. Now, should they? I mean,
that's true. Now, so here's the question: the guitars in question, by the way, that the amount of money is $14 million, and they. If I'm remembering, I'm going by memory. $14 million, $2 million per guitar type. Okay, 2 of the guitars. By the way, they're not all Dean. And by the way, let's not call Dean the little fish anymore, because Dean is actually owned by a conglomerate now or whatever. So Dean itself is not the little builder it used to be 30 years ago, and it is not the same company. All right. I believe it's owned by an overseas company. So there's a possibility, there's a reasoning behind what Gibson is doing now. Because a lot of people were like, well, wait a minute. It was 40 years ago that Dean introduced 2 of the body shapes that they're complaining about. The V-style body shape, which is an exact representation.
Yeah, I mean, other than the headstock, that guitar is identical.
Right. That is an exact. You can lay those 2 guitars over each other. There was a other channel that did a.
Didn't they steal the headstock?
2 silhouettes.
Didn't they steal the headstock off another?
Off the Modern. That's the next one. So the bodies lay exactly over each other. That's the V and the Explorer type. So they're an exact representation. Even the layout of the knobs are exact. And the only difference between the 2 is the Gibsons have pick guards and the Deans don't.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, folks. I have my allergies are killing me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I can't even breathe through my nose.
Jim's not squeaking a whole lot anymore. He was squeaking before the show.
Yeah, because I'm not trying to breathe through my nose. Then the other thing that, so the other guitars in question, there's the Modern, or the Modern. You can call it whatever you want. It's modern with the E at the end, so Modern. It's Modern Day. It's got the V headstock thing, and that's the other thing. And they did. Dean, I didn't know Dean created an almost exact replica also of the Modern.
Yeah,
the modern or whatever. Modern.
This is a long time ago, though.
Yeah, and it's a weird looking, fugly guitar.
Why would you knock that off?
Don't know.
Maybe they didn't understand that the sales figures were.
The other guitars are actually under other names owned by the same or the same group that has Dean, and that's why
the guitars or whatever, right?
Yeah. So Luna Guitars is 2 of them. They have 2, and they're actually going after They were silly enough to make exact copies of like the Dove and the Hummingbird, and then call them like the Turtle Dove and the Little Bird or something. It's ridiculously.
Yeah, so
didn't even bother trying to hide the fact that they were exact copies.
So here's the thing. Like, yes, all right. So we've established that like these are the things they're suing over, right?
Right.
But let's just back up and already start talking about the philosophical ramifications of this, right? So if Dean obviously committed infringement I think everybody here knows that these are copies of Gibson designs. They're obviously copies of Gibson designs, and people are okay with that, right? They've been buying them for years, and how many people have been buying them, that's up for discretion and another conversation. But they've been around for a while, right? And some of these have been more recent, and some of these are older. And of course, Dean has changed hands between people who owned it back then and people who own it now. And some of these models predate current Dean ownership. That gets into the real like messed up side of this, right? But if it weren't Dean guitars, right? Let's say Wild Audio comes out with a Les Paul copy, right? It's got the same body, similar headstock, maybe not the same headstock, but similar headstock. Like, would it be okay for Gibson to sue them? And I mean, honestly, I had this discussion with Nick, and I think it is. I think they're within their rights to say, you know what, this is our intellectual property. We have to defend it for legal reasons. They have to. I mean, that's what people understand. If they don't defend it, then it enters into public domain. So, yes, Gibson might be a little late on this, but that's up for the court to decide at this point. And I think that's kind of how they're playing it.
And it's not really about winning or losing this suit. I mean, you remember, okay, everybody remembers
this property.
Right. So 2000, 2001, they sued Paul Reed Smith.
Yeah.
Right. And they won. And then PRS stopped producing the single cut for a year. And then they went back and got it overturned.
Yeah, they got it overturned, right.
Here's the thing. So everybody's like, oh, they picked on Paul Reed Smith. And Paul Reed Smith didn't create a single cut for a single year. Do you know what the demand did for the single cut in 2002 or 3 when it went back into the market?
Actually worked out to his advantage.
Come on, he did that. Paul can say all day long that he was, but come on, it worked out to his advantage.
He did a really good job of selling guitars for him.
That's right. Don't tell me he didn't know that going out. I literally said to somebody when that suit got and Gibson won the first time. When Gibson won the first time, I said, in round 2, Gibson will not win. And,
yeah, because they're not the same guitar. Like, they're not even close.
Right. And Paul Reed Smith will win. And what's going to happen when Paul Reed Smith will win, when Paul Reed Smith wins, because remember, they're not only not exact copy, they're not the same scale length. There's a lot of different.
They're very different.
Their controls are different.
That's
they
what
purposely put their controls different. So I mean,
that was shocking to me that lawsuit played out the first time the way it did, because I was like, really? Because there's a lot more close copies of the Les Paul.
This is why I said everybody was like, oh, they were doing the same thing. Oh, they're not even close. Blah 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 blah. And I said, are you kidding me? Paul went like that. He went, oh, that hurt. I must fall down. Oh, yes, lawyers, tell them that they won. You know.
Yeah.
And then now file it back. Pow. And then and then the demand on the single cut rose because all these people were feeling sorry for. You don't think the same thing would happen to Dean? Come on. Dean, oh no, we're right, we lose. Everybody feels sorry for us. Oh, look, the judge overturned it for us. We're going to make a bunch of money selling double the cut because nobody's been buying them for the last couple of years anyway. Come on, Gibson knows that nobody who buys an Explorer buys a Dean ML or MK1 or whatever.
The only reason this lawsuit is even going forward at this point is a warning shot to people who make things like Firebird knockoffs that are identical and period correct, who will remain nameless.
I wonder who that is.
Yeah, I think we both know who I'm talking about. And those people, they need to stop. Like, at this point. However, I do think that what Gibson should have done, they should have spun the video differently, right? Like, that was a mess, and that video should never have happened the way it did.
So I want to speak to the video. Okay, first of all, I'm surprised McNeese still got his job.
I don't think McNeese's responsible for it. I think that's why.
I don't know, because you got to remember he is the president or VP or whatever, senior VP of his domain. So even if he was or wasn't responsible for it, those guys lose their jobs as nope, sorry, you're out. They still they get compensated. Believe me,
I know. You're trying to suggest that he's a sacrificial lamb.
He'd become a sacrificial lamb.
I think they didn't judge what the reaction was going to be.
I don't think. All right. First of all, I'm going to sound very unpopular by saying this. The message of it was play authentic. Okay, he didn't go, don't play this, don't play that, don't play this. What he did was he said play authentic. In other words, he brought out Gibsons, played them, play authentic. It wasn't don't play this. What they're trying to do with it, and it's very difficult, is they have to protect the body shapes of the headstocks because of Gibson, right? Otherwise, because the Gibson market is exploding, and anybody who doesn't think that the Gibson market is exploding is
Yeah, and that's
turning a.
I think they should have gone specifically after that though in the video, and not been like anybody who does and play off. It really felt like an ad campaign gone wrong, where it was like, hey, we're making these guitars and whatever, and I think part of it's because Gibson's offering their product as an alternative to a $300 knockoff. Like,
and that's not
never going to work.
Right, it's not realistic.
Okay, pursue him in Chinese court. Let me know how that goes for you.
Yeah, here's the thing that because first of all, you never win the Chinese court because the laws are different. I got a friend who's a patent and import export lawyer over there. Believe me, you'd never win, and you'll never shut them down.
That's what I'm saying. Like
the only thing that they're trying to do is convince the people at home buy authentic. But the problem is you can't say to a person who's only got $300 in their pocket to buy a $2,500 Gibson. I don't care if you come down to $2,200 or $2,100 or $1,800. The kid with $300 in their pocket can't afford it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, let's think about that for a minute. So even if, like, let's say, and I'm gonna preface this with, we're gonna talk about Epiphone, so where my opinions lie on this. But let's say the $350 kid says, only a Gibson is good enough, right? And then he stops and he says, well, I can buy an Epiphone. And so he stops and he goes to the store to buy an Epiphone. What can he buy in that range if he wants a Les Paul? I mean,
right.
He could buy an Epiphone Les Paul Studio.
Right.
And
you can't even get the Plus Top Pro. Now,
right. Well, and to that end, I don't think anybody looks at Epiphone and says that's gigging or studio quality anymore.
I don't know if they're saying it's not. I've got a lot of friends who would gig with an Epiphone, and there's only one reason they won't. And we've talked about it before. It's that headstock.
Yeah, well, I mean, the headstock's part of it, but I think, the Epiphones I've played, they have nice necks and stuff. The pickups are awful. That's what I'm saying. Like, you'd never use that in the studio. I don't know if most people would use it on stage. I would say I don't see them around on stage. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I've got some friends who have had their headstocks altered. I don't want to throw anybody's name out there, but have literally bought Epiphones, had their headstocks altered, and they're playing Epiphones on stage.
Well,
with a Gibson logo on. So Gibson, play authentic.
Well, so that's the problem. Another philosophical problem, right? So they say play authentic or only a Gibson is good enough, right? And then you stop and you think about that for a minute. But it's like only a Gibson is good enough, but then you're selling under the Epiphone label.
And seriously though, if you took an Epiphone and you pop those pickups out and the pots, in other words, you replace the electronics, maybe the nut on a. Let's say you bought a high-end Les Paul, Epiphone Les Paul, which is around $600 these days now, $550, $600. I think $700 for some of the higher inputs. But let's say you know, like Custom Pro or whatever. Well, let's say you spent $500 in Epiphone. You could then pull out all the electronics, put new electronic or put replacement electronics in there, and replace the nut for what, $5? Installation costs another $20, right? So you could literally walk away for another $300 or so with a Les Paul. It's just, as far as looks go, yeah, it might not wear the same as an authentic Les Studio, or standard 15, 20 years from now. Who gives a crap?
So
the people that want the look in 20 years give a crap, but I'm just saying.
So I think part of my rub, and I had a long conversation with Nick on this. And I wish he was on the show tonight, but he's got some things going on, so he's tied up. Um, I think part of this whole thing that really irritates me is like I came into this conversation thinking Gibson's way forward is to beat the Chinese at their own game, right? So come up with a way to make an imported Gibson that is around the $600 to $750 mark that gives you the features and look of an expensive Gibson at a reduced price. And I'm not talking about a faded series. We've done that before and it's all US based and all that. I'm talking about like a dyed in the wool Les Paul standard style guitar, with binding and the whole schmear, maybe USA pickups.
But that's what they're doing now. They're the line of Gibson, or I mean, I'm sorry, Epiphones. I apologize.
I know, but that's the wrong brand. That's the problem.
You're that's exactly what I said. There's a lot of people who are like, I would buy that if it didn't say Epiphone across the top with a big wide.
I'm not really even that concerned about the Epiphone name on it if the the inlay is right and the headstock looks correct.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
If they made the headstock the standard bookbinding, right, open book, and they did everything else, if you cut the headstock off an Epiphone, it is in all intents and purposes looks wise.
Yeah, very similar.
Right?
Yeah.
Now if like you said, and I think that they could do that, like it's similar to the S2 series that
I mean
Smith does. Ship the Epiphone over. The bulk of the work is done, right? And now you've got the whole guitar with the exception of the electrons. Now throw your pickups in there, or even have them put the pickups in it. Who cares? Well, have them ship it back over, and I look. Paul Reed Smith is putting in the Korean bridge, right? The Korean pickups, and so on and so forth, and still getting away with it. I ship the damn guitar over here, done except for the electronics. Put the electronics in, do a setup, do a test, and ship it out the door. It's going to cost a few more dollars, but I'm sure. Well, people would be willing to buy it.
So here's the issue, right?
Yeah.
So this whole moniker that only a Gibson is good enough, and their heritage, they talk about 120 years of being made in the States, and like that's not going to change, and those kinds of things. I understand a couple of things about Gibson, talking to some of the Gibson guys at Sweetwater that I didn't understand before, which is, look, Gibson is a company. They thrive on the fact that they're collectors, right? The vast majority of people that have been buying Gibsons over the last 5 years are collectors, which is why they've been doing so many of these collectors runs, like the van colors and all that stuff that they've done. And they've been keeping the company afloat. So if you lose those $4,000 buyers that are willing to buy a Gibson every year, at that price, with a company with capital problems like they quote unquote have, because that's debatable at this point. They've obviously gotten themselves out of bankruptcy already. Then you begin to kind of scratch your head and go, can they really afford to abandon their core buyers? Because I think that's what happens. If they were to shift a great deal of their production mentality over to developing some lower cost instruments for people, I think you're going to see the collectors drop off, because now the golden age of Gibson is over, which is the USA made quality and all that. And it'll be a long transition, but it might be enough to kill the company over time. Because let's face it, the vast majority of what Gibson's selling right now are not acoustics. They're electrics. That's where their money's going. Like Les Pauls are probably keeping the doors open. SGs are probably filling the pockets a little bit more, and maybe 335s and the hollow bodies are a whole other thing. I think if Gibson were to do this, what they would want to do is to try to find some sort of middle ground where they could produce a guitar in the States around $1,000 that isn't a double cut with a satin finish that's poorly applied, because that's what they look like to me. When I saw them, they're not. It's not that they're poorly applied. It's just that they're not like a true satin finish. They're just like a stain almost.
Yeah, I
very,
wasn't
very
crazy. I
thin.
wasn't crazy about
Like,
the
and
look of
and
it.
it'll wear out real fast, which a lot of people like. But the thing is, for $1,000, come on, you can do better than that. Um, I I think they can come up with an instrument that I think people like, but I think it's going to have to be a new instrument.
Yeah, but okay. You have a lot of valid points, and I agree with you wholeheartedly about the standards that are and obviously the standard as it will be applied is $2,500. So you're still going with now what it's called the modern, um, which is going to be the ones that are $3,000 and $4,000, right?
Right.
And
So
your special editions are still going to be out there.
So absolutely, the standard right now is like $2,500 or $2,600, and then I still think that's out of the realm of
25.
affordability for most your average musician at this point, right? Like, so the guy that plays
That's
in
right.
the weekend gig band,
That's right. Because let's face it, even the most expensive Fender that's a Stratocaster or Telecaster that's out there
is sub
that's
2,000.
not well,
It's
it's
not custom
right
shop,
at
not custom shop.
20, right? That's not custom shop. It's right at about $2,200. So it's still cheaper than the Gibson, which that's why to me it's just weird to me because of the fact they're bolt-ons and everything else. But we can go into that. We can go down that road later. But the fact is that people will pay what they pay. The whether or not a bolt-on is ever going to put as much work into it with a not figured top. There isn't a Stratocaster in the world that's got a figured top. So
Yeah. Well, so here's I think this is part of the issue, right? So Fender has more extravagant hardware in the sense that it actually does stuff, right? Their electronics are simpler. They're assembly line guitars, so they're built that they can be assembled in a cheap and inefficient way. I think Gibson has wiggle room in the way that they produce guitars, but I think that's also a pitfall area for them that they could potentially reduce the cost of a Les Paul a couple $100 by doing some things in the factory a little differently, maybe doing some more CNC, maybe doing some electronics that are a little bit more simple to drop in. I think Juskowitz was actually trying to do that. But I think the pitfall there is we've already seen the backlash from the traditionalists anytime they change anything, and I think that's going to make that much more contentious to move forward. However, if you continue to have the Les Paul standard and you have something like, and I don't want to call it this, but like the Les Paul value, which would be like a traditional Les Paul but manufactured under more modern conditions, like in the way that you would manufacture other guitars around that value point and from other brands, even with a carved top and all those things. I think they could do it, but they would have to be very, very clear that the standard is still made the way that they used to make it.
Well, that's where I got is that if you took an Epiphone, whether you put the name Gibson or Epiphone at the top of the headstock doesn't matter. But if you took an Epiphone and you made the headstock similar, shipped them in, I don't think that's going to
country of origin still matters. That's
no. I agree with you. I wholeheartedly. That's what I was getting at. You don't ever lie to people and say, "Yeah, I made this."
Well, I'm just saying, like us for us, country of origin doesn't matter. For Gibson's typical buyer, if it doesn't say it's made in USA, they don't want it. I think that's what I'm getting at is that like they really have to figure out how to do this in the States somehow.
I think that they could get more Epiphones out the door that way. Honestly,
well, they have to
could
change the
get more
headstock shape.
people to if all they did was change the headstock.
Sure,
if they were just willing to do that.
Sure, but they may not be willing to do that, and I'll tell you why. Because they figure they can still get people to buy those higher end Gibsons because that's a feature.
No one who buys a sub $1,000 Epiphone wants a $2,500 Gibson Les Paul. They want it. I should say want it. Can buy the $2,500 Les Paul. That's just that. The number of people, the fine line people who would say, "Oh, I'll just buy an Epiphone," because I don't think that's there. Honestly, I think for the same reason that the people who are buying core PRSs aren't the people buying S2s.
I don't think those people are buying Epiphone either. I think they're buying Fender now.
I don't think so. I think if
I
you want a Les Paul, you want a Les Paul. You don't
I
want a Fender.
I have to say, I think that there are a lot of people at that low end of the market that are like, I want a quality guitar, and they don't care who it comes from.
That's what I'm saying.
And they look at Epiphone and they go, what Epiphone's putting out right now is not quality.
I would disagree only in the last, again, when the Jeskowitz went out and what's his name came in, the one thing they haven't talked about are some of the changes they've done.
Well,
they haven't really made a lot.
I'm not really sure that they have made a lot of changes to Epiphone. They've been so worried about what they're going to do with Gibson proper that I don't think the line over at Epiphone has changed that significantly yet. It will. I mean, I rest assured, I think that it's going to be all new thing very shortly, because it has to be now. I mean, they fired the first shots in a war. So
the first thing I noticed was afterwards, because Anderton's did a ton of videos post change.
Well, we'll know in a month,
and one of the
they're going to Summer Dam.
Yeah, one of the things that they talked about was the fact that now they're putting the Gibson USA stuff in the Epiphones. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Like I said, I mean, Summer Dam, possibly Winter Dam next year.
I mean, personally, like I would love to do what I suggested initially when we talked about how we were going to cover this topic, and that is I would love to see Gibson be like, all right, look, well, we got to do the same thing as what Fender has done to bridge the gap between Squier and Fender, and just start like mixing it up and not telling people, but just like pulling back the veil and saying, look, it really doesn't matter where the parts are coming from. It's not that important as long as the quality's good and you guys are happy. And so, I mean, I played 3 different Fenders. I played the Player Series, the Professional Series, and I played the Elite, right? The top tier $2,000 Strat. And actually, I felt like all 3 were really good for what they were charging for. I didn't think they were perfect, but I was looking at them and going, well, this one's only, this one's only like $700. Like, I get it. Like, but it's really good for $700.
For $700.
And then I looked at the American and I was like, this is really good for like the 1100 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then the Elite, I was like, this is a really top quality, like top end Stratocaster,
$12,000 or $2,000 guitar.
Yeah. And I actually didn't even realize what it was until I looked down and saw the $2,000 price tag, and I was like, all right, yeah, that makes sense. But I'd like to feel that same thing when I pick up an Epiphone, and I don't really look at Epiphones and go, this feels like a, I had I think one of the Les Pauls, not a Sweetwater, but a couple weeks ago, and I looked down and I was like, this has got to be like a $300 guitar. It was like $500, and I'm like, oh my god, like what is going on here? And it's obviously it's not a brand new model. Like it's probably something that's been hanging on the rack, but still, like it just did not seem right. You could see finish flaws in it and everything else. I was like, this is messed up.
Yeah. So the Anderton video that I'm talking about, it was relatively recent. It was only the last few weeks, but maybe 2 months ago. The one thing that he said, I'm going to give you, I'm going to give Gibson 2 points that I would tell them. One, don't put all these stupid stickers on here.
Yeah.
It's like a sticker everywhere. The don't throw this in the trash sticker. Like,
don't put them on the pick guard, and don't put anything on the pick guards, because if it hangs in a window.
That's exactly the one I was talking about. That QR thing they're putting in the pick. What the heck is that all about? But anyway, they got all those things. And then he said, the other thing is change those damn headsets. He said, I could sell a lot more of these. You got to remember, we can't look at this in our own little bubble. We've got to look at this in the whole worldwide bubble.
Yeah.
And, Anderton, he sells to a lot of people.
Well,
that guy.
And you also have to remember, like they're in England. So for example, like PRS, their PRSs don't come from the same place as ours. Their SEs don't come from the same place as ours. They come from Korea. Ours come from Indonesia. They're made by Cortec now.
That's a recent change, and theirs will come from Indonesia
eventually. But they from what I understand, it's going to be another 2 years. That's what I heard.
Well, it's because everything that's in a line You got to remember, just like the
Mhm.
stuff that comes into the States goes out faster, and so the Indonesian ones, or I mean, the Korean ones are gone, and the Indonesian ones.
Right. But they also have some different models overseas too, is my understanding. But
That's true.
that they're just like different colors and that kind of thing. But and they get different cases, which is another whole thing, because shipping and all that stuff is different. But
Yep.
my point being that if Gibson wanted to make inroads in foreign countries, they could potentially consider making some European only models. And that's an option for them. It's certainly a
Yeah.
viable one.
They did do the Orvals and stuff like that were Asian only. So they could do something like that.
Yeah.
The point is that I think, coming down to it though, play authentic. We've talked about this before. If you're gonna buy a Gibson, put your own name on it.
Yeah, do
Put something
something
on it. I mean,
else.
that's all.
Don't open yourself up to this stupid stuff. I mean, it's illegal to buy one, first off. You put it on
Well, it's
YouTube, you
illegal to
get
sell
banned.
it.
We know people who have been banned from YouTube for that.
Right. It's illegal to sell it. And I want
It's
to say that
also
there's
illegal to knowingly buy one.
knowingly import it.
Yeah.
There's a place called, I'm going to throw their name under the bus anyway, Zuni Trading Post over at Newport News. And they've got a knowing fake Gibson ES335 hanging on the wall. And it says it's a fake Gibson.
Yeah.
Not a Gibson. But it says Gibson on the headstock, has the little, leaf and everything. And I'm like, okay, so this is a fake. You guys should also know you can't sell that.
Yeah, I mean,
illegal to sell it.
Honestly, what they should do is probably damage the not the like change the logo somehow.
Yeah, the Gibson logo.
Yeah.
I've seen it where people literally scratch that logo off.
Mm-hmm. I would.
But there's a guy that's got a quote unquote Gibson for sale locally, and he's trying to sell it as a Gibson. But the one thing he won't take a picture of is he won't take a close up picture of the oh, come on, Jim. The saddles,
okay,
or the bridge, and he won't take
it's
a
not
close
standard
up
AVR.
picture.
Yeah,
he won't take a picture of the headstock either.
Right. So, yeah. I mean, I don't want to cover this too much, because I think it's probably been done to death on everybody else's show at this point. But it's just important that, like, we all realize that Gibson's still going through massive changes, and this could be a 3 or 4 year process where they're still finding their legs. And I've heard it said in a couple of other groups, and I think it's really important to keep this in mind. But the last time Gibson was this deep in trouble, and they had hired like somebody to come in and fix it, Henry Juskowitz came in. Henry didn't fix it. Okay, everybody thinks Henry fixed it, but what really happened was that Guns N' Roses happened, right? So Slash brought back the Les Paul, and then they started selling them, and other bands picked them up too. And then that continued to grow and grow through the 90s, when you had grunge bands that were actually getting into Gibsons and stuff as well. Maybe they were playing the off-the-wall ones in some cases, but there was a lot of guys that were into the double cutaway flat top Les Pauls and stuff like that in the new metal movement as well. And I think that helped propel them to where they finally felt like they could innovate, and then they fell flat on their face because the guitars they tried to innovate the whole line, and it was like, what are you guys doing? Like, you just don't seem to get that people don't want that. I don't have a problem with the robot tuners and stuff like that. I think some people really freak out about those things, but I think that was a valiant effort to do something unique and different. But I think that they should have done that on a very select group of guitars instead of the whole line in 2015. That was a silly decision, and it almost cost them the company. And I don't think anybody knows. There's been a lot of people that have said, oh, well, Gibson made a lot of decisions that really like hurt them. Gibson had an awful year in 2015 when they did that. And I don't think anybody realizes how much that actually affected their balance sheet. If you have an entire run of guitars, and that's what you do as a company, you spend all of your money making these guitars, equipping them with high-tech stuff, and then it doesn't sell, what are you going to do? You're going to be broke. That's what you're going to do. And I have a feeling that's what happened. They put their neck out there, and it got stepped on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Definitely.
it may have been the last in a string of things like that, but it was definitely that was significant, and I don't think people
You
realize
would
how
think
significant.
you would think they would have learned their lesson with the what was it, the Explorer 2 or the X Explorer,
Yeah,
the
I think they
Firebird
just thought
X, Firebird
if we
X.
just kept doing this stuff, they figured that it would eventually catch on, and it just wasn't gonna happen. I mean,
I could see it once, twice, but geez, for years they were doing this mess stuff. What was the Firebird X was 2013, right?
yeah, but when they did it in 2015 across the entire line, that was like blasphemy, and that's the way that the guitar market reacted. Was like,
Yeah.
what are we doing here? Wait a minute, did Gibson just lose their mind? Because they did. They literally stopped
They did.
caring about what the core buyers wanted.
Yeah.
And
So I was playing acoustics today, like I told you,
Mhm.
and I tried a Gibson acoustic.
Right.
So I played a Martin. Martin was about a $1,600 Martin, and I switched over to a Gibson acoustic, and it was a $2,000 Hummingbird.
Mhm.
It was on sale from like 23 or 2,400. So it wasn't didn't have all the accoutrements of the $4,000
Right.
model, which it was exactly the same guitar except really cool stuff on. And I didn't like it. I was shocked and amazed because I love hummingbirds normally. The back of the neck was like a $600 Fender finished neck. It was so sticky, gooey, as far as
Yeah,
that.
but Jim, part of that is you're playing different guitars now, and you're going back and forth, and you're like, this is not what I expect.
Yeah.
Because I know
Well,
I have that
the
moment.
Martin, I went right. I didn't have that problem with the Martin or the Taylors I played, but the Gibson, I put my hand on that and I could not.
Any idea what year it was?
No, brand new.
Yeah, but brand new could be 3
Well,
years old.
yeah, it could be 2 or 3 years old. I don't know.
Because
But
I noticed they've been starting to take the years off the tags now.
yeah, yeah, the year was definitely not on the tag. I would have had to look at the serial number, which is inside, then run the serial number.
Yeah, and they've done that because they were discounted. So I remember like a year ago they were still selling 2015s. That's why I said
Yeah.
that 2015 thing is still lingering.
Yeah, well, this was like I said, this was acoustic. This was a Hummingbird acoustic, which I was just shocked that I didn't really like it because I played Doves and Hummingbirds in the past, and I really liked them, and I was not impressed at all, at all. I liked the sound of it; it was great, but I couldn't. I was like, I would have to sand this neck.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, consider this, right? So it's not just the fact that they did that in 2015, right? And it's not just the fact that they're still maybe producing some questionable product, but it's the fact that when they did it in 2015, they took those guitars back and fixed them all.
They did. They in 2015 they had to take them and put regular tuners
Can
on.
you
They had to take
imagine
the
the
robot.
amount of loss that that company took on when they did that?
Yeah.
Not only did you have, I mean, because you literally paid for the labor to fix them.
Yeah, they offered to send them to you, the replacement tuners, or you could have the
They were
place
pulling them off
replace
store
them.
shelves and replacing them too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the store could say, "Hey, I don't want
Right,
any.
right.
Go do it,
So
do it."
anyway, so just food for thought going into all these discussions about new lawsuits and stuff. I know they're still gonna be coming, and we shouldn't all be surprised. I mean, this is par for the course. As far as the video goes, that could have been handled differently, obviously. And I think they
Yeah,
should have made very clear that like we're gonna really what that video should have been is look, there's a lot of imposters out there. You need to play authentic because we are going to produce, and it should have been just like this. We're going to produce the best guitars we've ever produced in the next 5 years, and they're going to be available for you.
right.
That's
But the
how that
thing that
should have
they've
been
got to
done.
make sure of, right? They got to make sure of quality, and they got to make sure of quality not only on their end, but they got to make sure that their dealers are doing quality.
Yeah.
But I can say that as far as their dealers go, a lot of old dealers that left Gibson are coming back.
Yeah.
And the reason is because Gibson is no longer like, okay, now you got to have like $4
They're
million
changing
of
their dealer
inventory.
agreements because they know they have
Yeah,
to. Yeah, and that's critical for them because that's been a thorn in their side since day one.
Yep.
So, that we talked about Gibson, we talked about Gearfest. You're obviously looking into Martin right now, an
Yep.
acoustic. I mean, what else you got going on? Like I got because we haven't been in touch the last couple of days. So
Yeah. So you know about my personal side.
yeah,
of
that's
it,
a whole
so,
other thing.
Yep. So yeah, I got some playing going
Why
on.
don't you
Then I
tell
got to
everybody
take.
why you actually missed Gearfest?
I fell down.
You fell down if you couldn't get up.
So what happened was they had I should sue them. Maybe I can get some money, but no.
You might need it.
I was doing the open mic at a small club in Chesapeake, and I stepped off stage about 8 to 9 inches off the floor. And when I stepped down, the floor was wet where I stepped. My ankle went in, and my body went out. And as a matter of fact, I feel it right now because it's better, but it's
still swollen.
Not great. Yeah, it's still the swelling is almost gone, almost. But now the bruising is still there.
Yeah, I've seen photos, folks. It's not pretty.
The inside, yeah, the photo. If the one that David saw was when David saw it when it was literally double. The size
I said, well, I guess you're not going to Gearfest. that was my reaction.
It hadn't bruised yet. The next day, the bruising came out, and it was it was purple. But the inside right now hurts. The inside of the ankle, and it might be because, like, as I was walking, I would have to because I refuse. I come from an old school of walk it off, and so I was favoring everything. So now I've got like my calf hurts, my shin hurts, and my this hurts, that hurt on the other leg because
because you're favoring it, right? Like
right. So
hey,
yeah, folks, make sure when you're stepping off on and off that stage, you check for that. I did not expect that to happen to me.
Can I make you feel better for a minute, Jim?
Yeah,
so
sure.
remember that in the winter, I pulled my groin by sitting on the floor Indian style playing guitar. So it's almost as bad as what I did. And by the way, my groin strain still bothers me once in a while. It's been 6 months, and according to my doctor, it can take up to a year to heal. So
it's pretty bad. And you got to remember, I'm older. Ankles on older people. I'm lucky. I'm actually lucky because I could have snapped it. I easily could.
Oh, sure.
But I was smart enough. Once I felt the pain, I said, "All right, let go." And I went totally limp, and I went right down to my shoulder. I did a shoulder roll, and I came out of it. But then, as I was walking out the door, because the pain isn't there at first till you take that first step, right? You step on it, you go, "Oh, this is not going to be good," and then the swelling began. But I had a gig to do. And I stood up there and I got on and off the stage. That's the other thing. I didn't do myself any favors. Got up and down and on and off the stage, helping people out, playing backup to people. And yeah, that probably wasn't. It wasn't the best $100 I've ever made.
It cost you a lot of grief, pain. So anyway, I guess what I wanted to talk about. Oh, so I guess we can do some more Gearfest talk, right? Like Gearfest.
Well, yeah. So before you get into Gearfest, so everybody, before David went and decided to get the Kemper, I had been on the fence about Kemper Line 6. And so it's a good possibility that next year I'm going to do the Kemper thing, right? So I'll be buying at Gearfest next year. I'll be doing a similar thing. I'm really looking forward to hearing David's accounts of how well the foot switch works with him. How's the interface? How is the software? They're supposed to come out with a new software.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been in the current version. They're always coming out with new stuff.
Well, just like Line 6, they're supposed to come out with a new control software.
I'm waiting.
Whatever you call yourself, a management thing. Or,
the editor's coming, and then I'm waiting for actually for their cabs. Because I'm running through my Mark V cab, which is great, but it would be nice to be able to do like different speaker sounds through.
Yeah, so they have a cab that they introduced at Winter NAMM that still hasn't come out.
Yeah, and it's probably not going to be. They said sometime in summer, but I don't think it's going to be out at Summer Nam. I think it's a little bit away. But that the cool thing
when
is
does summer end? September 4th. Yeah, that's when it'll come out.
the cool thing is that they're going to be releasing the speakers so you can put them in whatever cab you want, which would be nice for people who have 412s and things like that, because I think their cab is only going to be a 1x12. So yeah, I mean, what I want to talk about, so like hospitality and stuff when we were there this year, everybody was, again, last year, everybody was super nice. I got to have some interesting conversations with a couple of people, just like random people that I ran into there. And the general consensus was like, Gearfest is a wonderful thing. I really felt like I sit in one of the sessions and they raised their hand, and they said, how many people here have been to Gearfest before? And everyone raised their hand except for a few people. How many people it's your first time? Like far fewer hands flew up. And it was like, how many people have been here more than 5 times? And I looked around the rooms and I was completely astounded by the amount of people that raised their hand. And again, we did the little map thing, and of course, some people are being jokers and putting stuff like I'm from Antarctica and stuff on there. But for the most part, like I spoke to a guy that was from like Poland. Some of the vendors, of course, come from all over the world. Some of the people who are there come from all over the world. I got to talk to Steve Stein just briefly. I said hello, and he was busy, so I didn't want to bother him too much. But we had a brief conversation. He remembered who I was, and of course he was asking where you were, and I said Jim fell off the stage. I said he's not here today. I said you'll have to ask him about it.
Did he laugh?
Yeah, he did. He's like, oh, is he okay? And I'm like, well, I said he might have broke his ankle, but he seems to be okay.
I'm sure he's been there before. Hey, is he as short as he says he is?
Dude, I didn't realize it was him. He was so short.
Yeah,
because his hair is super long, and like when you see him in the clips, he looks a lot taller because his hair is super long. He's probably 5'2".
That's what he was saying, about 5'2".
Yeah, I mean he was up to my shoulders, and I'm 5'8", so that sounds about right.
Yeah, you're only like an inch taller than I am. So.
But he was super nice and stuff. Saw Rudy Sarzo walking around.
Oh yeah, I thought I saw him in one of your clips.
He popped in the Line 6 tent real quick and then walked off. And I didn't get to really say much to him. I did see we didn't get to go see Greg Koch, but I did see him walking around. And I got to talk to him
How could you miss him?
Super briefly. I just said hello, love your music and whatever, and he was just like walking past. But I'm going to make an effort to go up and see him in Wisconsin this year at some point. Because I know he's performing all the time or whatever. But I mean, I ran into people that told me they weren't going to be there, and then they ended up being there. People that were there last year that I met. So the weird.
Oh, was Brian Wampler there?
Yeah, he was there, and I didn't touch him again this year, so it was much better. Kish and I were there at his booth and talked to him just briefly, and he was really nice to me, and like I think he did remember me because I mentioned, I was like, we spoke last year, and he's like, yeah, I remember. And I was just thinking like, yeah, I'm sure you do. He's like, don't you touch me.
Even if you, that's what I was going to say. You're that guy that almost
touched me. Was the guy that put his hand on my shoulder, that creep.
Weirdo.
Yeah. So, Josh Scott was there this year. I wanted to talk to him briefly and just tell him.
You did see Steve Vai.
Yeah. So I didn't go to the signing with him. We went to the performance. He played 2 songs and did a 45-minute interview. It was like, wow, this is lame. And I passed my feedback along to some of the Sweetwater employees. I was like, let them know that was lame. Nobody wants to come see Steve Vai talk. Like, no offense, but he basically sat there and hawked his product for like 45 minutes.
Now, what was the product he was hawking?
All right, so he's got the Synergy module that's coming out.
Oh, yeah.
And which to me signals the end of his work with Carvin Audio. Which is okay. Like I kind of saw it coming because Carvin Audio is obviously pretty much defunct. I know they might be still in operation, but I don't know anybody who's purchased their product, and that's kind of telling. but it just seems to me that synergy probably is a way to go for him since he's a super audiophile. And he's probably not ready to ditch tubes, although there's a lot of speculation that he's actually using the Axe effects and will continue to use the Axe effects. I know people have said that he was using it for effects only. I doubt that. I really do doubt that.
Right.
It's such a convenient tool. I mean, he might be using dummy cabs and just using the Axe effects and wedges and all that.
Yeah.
He seemed like a nice enough dude, but I just think that like something about how his situation was handled at Gearfest, somebody pissed in his Wheaties, basically. That's what it felt like to me. So he was phoning it in. He wasn't funny in the interview. He was basically talking about, well, I use this product and this product and this product. It's like, and he played like two songs. I forget what song he played in the beginning, but I know he played "For the Love of God" at the end. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what we expect. You're going to play that song, but where's the other stuff? Like, but he didn't have his band with him. His music is very challenging, and I have a feeling that's kind of like what this conversation went like. Was like, well, I don't have tracks, or or like I can use tracks, and they didn't want to, or something, and then so it ended up being like a 45-minute interview.
Oh, so he played with people,
Yeah,
but
they
they
were.
weren't his band.
Yeah, he used the session musicians, I think, from
Oh,
Sweetwater, and
yeah,
they were able to
yeah.
keep up with him, which was pretty impressive. Um,
It's still tough.
yeah. So, and then also, we saw Eric Johnson the last night, and I was
Oh yeah, how was
really
that?
disappointed. He was making
Really?
mistakes left and right, and it just he just wasn't on his game. And I don't know if there was something like going on with the sound or what, but he was just not on his game. And we
Wow.
stayed. He played like Cliffs of Dover like 4 songs into his set, and as soon as that happened, we went down to the bargain tent because we were like, well, I was like, we got to see what we wanted to see, I guess, because he just was
Oh
not that
wow.
great. And I was really disappointed because I saw him years ago and he was on fire. And then I saw
Yeah.
him about 2 years later and he was like kind of phoning it in, but he was opening for somebody. And then we saw him at Gearfest and he was very much phoning it in. It was pretty.
You got to wonder. So, how old is Eric Johnson now?
He's got to be in his
Got to be close to
60s.
my
I
age.
mean, he's in
Yeah.
50s, 60s. But the thing is, I think he's just doing it different now. Like now it's not about the technical ferocity. So he's not practicing as much. And I think he's happier living in the moment, but him living in the moment is sonically kind of ugly. Because he's playing the
Well,
wrong notes at times and
well, you
it
got to
was
wonder if
painful.
at that age. Well, that's what I was about to say. At that age, it might be literally painful for him to
Well,
play. He might have
I
onsets of arthritis. A lot of these guys that play that much at the for the so many
I think
years and so on.
monitoring was a bigger issue for him, to be honest with you. He might have been playing with
You
in-ears
think?
and not used to it. And I
Yeah.
think doing that probably because his rhythm was off. It was like he couldn't hear the drums. And
Wow.
there were times where he was like not a half beat off, but maybe an eighth of a beat off or a
Yeah.
16th of a beat off. And you're going, what? He must not be able to hear because like we know he can play. I've seen him before. I've seen him play
Right. Right.
phenomenally. And it was a bad night for him. But it was weird
Yeah.
because I've seen him with 2 bad nights, which makes me wonder if he just doesn't
Well,
have it anymore.
that's why I was saying
Yeah.
that. Sometimes the fingers they're whether it's early onset of arthritis or if it's sometimes the muscles.
Oh, yeah, and I was just gonna
It
say, like, it may just even be that he's just out of practice, and that's
right.
and for a guy like him, like they were at one point they were saying he practiced like 8, 9 hours a day. He may not be doing it anymore. He just may be like, I'm done. Like I've got my Grammys and like I've got a lot of money from doing this. Like I'm not gonna beat myself up over it anymore. And you know what? Good on
Yeah.
him. Like if that's how he feels about it, and he can still pack audiences, great. I mean, I'm sure that many of the people there were like thrilled to see him, and probably couldn't tell what we were able to tell. But I think we were all well versed enough in his music that we were kind of like, wow, this just isn't that great. Like his tone was awesome. I'll say that much. He sounds just like the records as always, but just was not like playing to the highest level. And so kind of weird to have him headlining when you had Steve Vai. that came in and did a clinic. That was kind of an odd choice. Which I'm still like, I know people. Robert Jackson mentioned that somebody he knew had like kind of a negative experience talking to Steve Vai as he was walking around the event, and whatever. And like, I'm not going to get in the middle of that. I still respect Steve Vai as an artist enough that I'm going to go see him the next time I get the opportunity. But I feel like Eric Johnson, I've seen him 3 times now. He's disappointed me twice. It's just no reason for me to do that anymore.
No. You can say you saw him, and why relive the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I still go back to that July 4th. I saw him back in probably 2005, 2006. He was incredible.
I've heard many people say the worst thing you could do is to meet your hero.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it's a tough one.
For sure.
Anyway, so that Dr. Z pedal, it's an overdrive, I guess. Is it? It says that it's got a MOSFET side and a germanium side.
Correct.
So should that be post? I know with a germanium, you don't want to put it after a buffer.
No.
So
No. That only applies to a fuzz pedal that doesn't have buffers or anything like that. It doesn't apply to like a germanium drive pedal because it's all basically they're just using it to sweeten the sound. And it might affect like and it does. I mean, in my experience, it does affect the way the pedal feels, and the kind of grit it puts out. But it's not gonna squeal because it has germanium in it. That's kind of a myth. And in fact, it's germanium diodes and not a germanium transistor, which is another thing too. Diodes are basically half transistor anyway. So
yes.
But yeah, I mean. My impression of that pedal was like it's not a tube screamer at all. It's not a amp in a box. It's like a very unique drive circuit. It reminded me of a 250 really. And I guess they said, well, it's supposed to be kind of like a Dr. Z. But I'm like, well, what is a Dr. Z really? I mean, because they make so many different amps that do so many different things. They really don't make one amp that is the Dr. Z sound, And that's why I was kind of like, it's supposed to sound like a Dr. Z. Like, what? You mean it has even order harmonics or what? Like, does it have even order harmonics? Is that what you're trying to say? Like, I'm just trying to figure it out. So I don't know. If I was in the market for a dry pedal, I probably would be interested in picking one up. I thought it sounded really, really good with that JTM 45 clone, the Nova. That's an amp that in a couple of years I might be springing for. Especially if I can get one used, because I think that's one of the problems with Dr. Z is their prices drop like a rock when they go used. I don't know if you've ever looked. I mean, you can get good Dr. Z's for like $600 or $700 if you're buying heads. So it's a hard sell to buy a new one for $1,500 or $2,000. But I'm definitely going to buy the profiles. That's a must because those amps were all really good in my opinion.
When I got my Lone Star, I was looking at a Dr. Z, not the Maserati. The
Maz 18. They're kind of like general purpose amp.
It was nice.
There's a lot of different things.
I liked it. But the truth is that the both of them were about the same price, $1,800.
Yeah, well, but the Maz for me, the Maz is kind of generic. Right. So like this amp does this like clean thing very well and this dirt thing. Okay. And it's, equipped to deal with pedals and it has, reverb and all these different things in it. Some of their other amps are just stripped down like dirt machines. Some of their other amps are like stripped down clean machines. Some of their amps are, like here's a tone knob. This is all you get. And so it was just kind of weird that amp is the one that a lot of people like tend to buy because it's just general purpose. When you have all these super specialized things they do,
The one I liked was the Wreck.
Yeah, the Wreck is cool. That's a train wreck clone.
Yeah.
He was good friends with Ken Fisher.
It was expensive.
He was good friends with Ken Fisher when he was alive. So he made some modifications to Ken Fisher's train wreck circuit, but he knows a lot of the secrets and how Ken was building them, which is why a lot of people love him. But even Brad Paisley's moved on from that. He's playing that Marshall thing now. Like the Marshall, there's some amp that they've collaborated on, which is like a blues breaker almost. Which is kind of strange to think that Brad Paisley's playing a Marshall.
I know,
It's
right?
not an AC. It's
Brad
not an
Paisley's
AC30.
he's playing a Marshall with a Telecaster, and it's who was it, Bradford or whatever
Yeah,
Telecaster.
something like that. I did see his telly at Gearfest. They still had some of his telly laying around. I don't know if they're still making.
Oh, you're talking about that one that comes from Mexico,
the silver one. That was a USA guitar.
Oh no, the one they built was made in Mexico.
Are you sure?
Yeah, look it up. It was made.
Oh,
in
I thought it
Mexico.
was. I thought it was.
It's like $1,100 or $1,200.
Yeah, I thought that was a USA model. I thought they got it under their price because it was all stripped down.
That's how they got the pricing. They put in Mexico, built it in Mexico.
That's the price.
And they put all the nice stuff. Again, that's what I was talking about with what Gibson should try to do is put some, do some collaborations with their overseas vendors. Yeah. I played one the other day at Guitar Center. They don't have a bad resale value. I think they go for like $900 used. It's a nice guitar.
Just the stupid road worn thing ruined it for me.
It's road worn, but not in a good way. It's exactly the same no matter which Paisley one you buy.
Yeah, I didn't even bother to pick it up for that reason.
Yeah, it's just a bad job of. They should have done it with just not bothered with the road worn. Yeah, so they got them silver sparkle.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at the I don't know if they've got one. I'm looking to see if I got a picture of the back of the headstock. Yeah, here it is. Right here. Yeah, made in Mexico. Right on Sweetwater site.
Yeah, but
the Fender.
Interestingly enough, it is nitro.
Yep. That's what I was saying. That's how they got the pricing down, was to do the road wearing and the nitro in Mexico.
Yeah, it's hilarious though that the nitro is, you know what I mean? Like, it's just hilarious to me that they did nitro on a Mexican guitar, and then the road worn part of it looks so cheesy.
So bad.
Yeah, I mean, if it was nitro, like, now that I know that, like, if I see one cheap, I might have to consider it and then just beat the hell out of it. It looks way better, because
I mean, the truth is, if you're going to do it nitro, they may as well just done it right.
Yeah,
just not worn it. Just done it
right,
because the nitro is going to wear
right,
and it would look better, and it would look like you.
Well, I highly doubt that he's actually playing any of his own Telecaster. When you see some of the guitars he's got,
no, he plays like he's got a boat of Telecasters that he plays every night.
Yeah.
And it's like let's see, Brad Paisley Telecaster. He plays, I can't remember how many different ones he plays, but he's got several of them that he carries. If you watch the who is it, Premier Guitar,
they do the rig rundown.
Does the thing. They do the rug rundown. Take a look at that. Look at what his tech shows you, and it's like, holy crap, he's got a boatload of them. But if you search for Brad Paisley Telecaster, all you find is that thing that we were just looking at. And it's not a bad guitar. It's actually a nice guitar. And folks, if you're looking at one, it is really nice. It's got the Paisley.
It's just stripped down, like
silver. It's nitro. It's just the what would you call that? The heel, the bout, where they did the wearing.
Yeah.
Looks like it was almost really bad sandpaper. They just wore it. But if you buy 3 of them and you put them next to each other, a good road worn, those will look different. It'll wear a little different.
No, these are all identical.
These are identically worn exactly the same way, which means
they were machine worn.
They had a to me, what it looks like is they had like a piece of tape thing or whatever they had, plastic that they put over it, sprayed the paint on, pulled that off, and then did the nitro.
Right.
And that, because they're all worn exactly the same place, exactly the same way. They had 3 of them in Guitar Center. One was used, 2 were on the wall, and all of them looked exactly the same. I can tell you one that wears really nicely, really quickly, believe it or not, is those satin tribute Les Pauls.
Of course.
Yeah, they wear well, and they look great.
All right. Well, we've been rambling on long enough. I have been David.
I've been Jim.
And tonight we were the Practical Guitarists.
Or Impractical, as it might be. What do you think?